Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation with a changemaker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable carbon-neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Carbon dioxide is humanity's most pressing problem. Since the dawn of the industrial era, about 250 years ago, humans have pumped more than 1.5 trillion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, warming the planet by 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit and bringing on the climate crisis. In addition to reducing emissions to zero, we need to remove this CO2 to start to cool the planet and return it to the temperatures in which we and the rest of the species on the planet evolved. And our food production, even our yards and gardens, can play a role. Our guest today is Ben Cloud, CEO of Biodel AG, a Maricopa, Arizona company that recently introduced Sequester, a soil treatment that restores the soil's ability to capture and hold CO2 that also promotes improved plant growth. Sequester is available for farming applications and even for home use. A $12.81 8-ounce bottle of Sequester can be used to improve the carbon sequestration capability of up to 2,500 square feet of your lawn or your garden. It's produced using a blend of cyanobacteria, the source of much of the breathable oxygen on our planet. In addition to helping capture carbon, Sequester reputedly reduces water consumption, salinity, and nitrogen use by 30%. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. You can learn more about Sequester at sequester.ag. That's sequester.ag. Welcome to the show, Ben. How are you doing today?
Really good, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us about Sequester. You guys launched this in September, and it was really interesting. So we wanted to get you on the show and talk about it. Can you tell us how Sequester works and what functions in the soil that it restores?
Yes, I'm glad to. Sequester rapidly restores soil health and function. And so, the key functions that we're looking for are cycling water, cycling nutrients, cycling salts even, and most importantly, cycling carbon.
Well, how does the Sequester bind and hold carbon in the soil? This is obviously a natural process. It's well understood, but how does it change that process?
Well, so the primary ingredient in Sequester is several strains of cyanobacteria. Mm-hmm. And cyanobacteria are really the most powerful microorganisms in the soil when it comes to soil health and function. They are photosynthetic autotrophs, which means they bring their own energy to the game, and they're really effective at rapidly reestablishing the soil's microbial biomass, which relates to those four essential functions that we're trying to impact.
So has the way we have treated fields and yards for the past 150 years killed a lot of the cyanobacteria? Is it missing, or is this additive to what is already there?
Certainly, our methods applying synthetic fertility and chemicals and things of that nature have been tremendously antagonistic to the microbial world, to the point that when it ceases to function, you start seeing an accumulation of salts building up in the soil. You have to continue to add more and more fertility products in order to keep things growing well. And of course, then that has the repercussions of environmental impact due to runoff and percolation through the soil profile into our groundwater, all of those factors. So cyanobacteria through Sequester, when we're increasing those numbers in the soil that are already existing, but we're enhancing, it has a pretty dramatic effect on the soil's ability to create the environment for that microbial activity to restore.
So how does a cyanobacteria treatment like this change the use of water in the soil? And your site talks about a 30% reduction in water consumption. So how does that happen?
Well, there's two ways. Number one is that when you reduce salinity, and so salinity has the impact of requiring greater energy and for the plant to take up water. Literally cell to cell, there's a restriction that builds, And so it keeps plants in a more dehydrated level, even though there might be a lot of water around it, just due to the salinity concentration. So reducing salinity actually improves the ability of the plant to take up the water that is there, which is in essence a savings. The other part of it is that it really aggressively aggregates the soil particles so that the moisture holding capacity within the soil profile is increased substantially.
So when you talk about desalinization, what happens to the salts that have built up in the soil when you treat it? Are they broken down by the cyanobacteria, or are they somehow sequestered themselves?
Yeah, that's what's really interesting about cyanobacteria in particular, is their ability to literally convert sodium ions into a calcium ion. Mm-hmm. And so it goes from something that's detrimental to the plant to something that's actually positive for the plant. And it can do this very rapidly. And so that's why Sequester as a product is really essential in managing that restoration process of soil health.
Well, I've experimented with things like azomite soil to improve the carbon capture of my garden in the past, and I'm really interested in using Sequester. For the home user, somebody looking at their yard or garden, what's involved in applying the Sequester? Is it sprayed on? Is it attached to a hose? How do you do it?
Well, it's a liquid product, so it's you just simply blend it with a little bit of water and apply it with a sprayer. Okay. Or if you have an ability with your irrigation system to inject into that, you can do that as well. The key thing is that you get the essential amount into the soil profile to see the benefits.
And how often do you need to use Sequester? Is it a once a year or a multi-time application?
The most ideal time to apply is always springtime. Mm-hmm. For example, if we're growing crops, you want to apply it at planting, even directly on the seed. But if you're growing at home or have a garden, apply it at planting there, and then come back after the crop emerges or a little later in the spring or early summer and apply again, just to help maintain those microbial numbers and function. Anything microbial is going to take a period of time to move from being in a depleted state, low soil organic matter conditions, into something that's much more improved and able to function. So you got to give it a little bit of time to perform.
So if you were to use this over the course of several years, have you established how much more productive the soil is? Say after I've done this for 3 years, am I looking at a 30%, just to pick the number that you guys have used repeatedly, improvement in the yield of my garden, for instance?
Well, where it pays off is the average yields.
Okay.
So because your soil is functional and in more of a healthy state, you're able to deal with what are called the abiotic stresses that plants endure from weather conditions or severe drought conditions, things of that nature, even insect pressure and the like. And so when the plant or the crop is able to withstand those conditions, on average, year over year, maintain a higher average yield.
Now, thinking about the suite of things that I might use to treat my yard or my crops as a farmer, is there anything that I would be able to stop using, or because I use Sequester, or is this literally something that instead of using the chemical fertilizers that people have used in the past, you can switch to this? So what's the trade-off, if there is one?
Yeah, the whole regenerative world opens up to one who uses our type of product and other similar products that are out there. And so we like to call it the 30-30-30 program, as you refer to the 30% number. We've gotten kind of used to using that because we're seeing a 30% reduction in the amount of fertilizer that should be applied. Just even the first year out, that should be reduced. Okay. Second reduction is then in the amount of water consumed or necessary to grow the crop successfully. which is really essential today and here in the Southwest where we're dealing with serious drought conditions. And the third is to see at least a 30% reduction in the amount of sodium content in the soil. Actually, that is where we really seem to perform the best. In field conditions, we're seeing as much as 75-80% reduction in salinity, which, as you can imagine, has a major impact on the amount of water that's necessary to grow the crop. It goes down considerably.
So part of the solution in the drought-stricken West for farmers will be to make this kind of a shift, it sounds like, hopefully.
Yes, exactly. Our original plan was to begin marketing Sequester in 2024, and just watching and understanding the literal collapse of the Colorado River system that we're experiencing here and seeing its impact on future years caused us to move this forward at least a year into 2023 as our primary market push.
Do you have an estimate at this point of how much CO2 can be sequestered by an acre of land treated with Sequester? And the extension of that question is, how much land would we need to treat in order to start to address the 35 billion tons of CO2 that humanity emits every year as a starting point?
We have some formal trials going on now. And as you can imagine, there's variation of soil types and conditions that change the actual amount of carbon that can be sequestered. And most important is how fast or rapidly a grower adopts to regenerative practices. Mm-hmm. If their objective is to make a slow transition, they're not going to see a large amount of carbon sequestered until they reduce that synthetic fertility applications, for example, down by about 70%. When they get to that point, they'll see the carbon levels increase rather dramatically.
That's very encouraging. So thinking about this natural carbon sink and improving the performance of all of our farmland and potentially all our lawns, if we choose to continue to have lawns, what's the appropriate role to think about using soil-based carbon sequestration as part of the suite of approaches we take to reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere? Have you given much thought to that or talked with experts about what role this should play?
Well, yes, we certainly have. Let me even backtrack a little bit to your previous question. You asked how much can we sequester? And there has been considerable studies going on and continuing to go on with regards to that. So if I was going to pick an average number today that agriculture could expect to sequester, it's 3 tons of CO2 per year.
Per acre.
Per acre. Right.
Okay.
And so when you start looking at the worldwide scenario, we're emitting 36 billion tons of carbon annually from current emissions. Mm-hmm. And, how effective can agriculture be in impacting that alone? The challenge there is that, at a 3-ton level, you're looking at 12 billion acres to mitigate that. Well, that's basically the ag land in China.
So just one country in the world has enough farmland to address this. That's there's the key word right there, Mitch, is when I said ag land. Ag land is not, it's representative of all lands that are used towards agricultural pursuits. Okay. The correct number to use or the correct evaluation to use is intensively farmed land. Okay. And so worldwide today, we only have about 2 billion acres of intensively farmed land, which means that inputs are applied to grow a crop. And so that is the acreage that would be more appropriate to use. So if we have 2 billion acres around the world, that is our primary food supply acreage. And that's generating 3 tons per acre in
CO2 sequestration, we are basically mitigating about 17 to 20% of total emissions if that was all in effect today.
I want to take a quick commercial break. I want to come back and talk a little more about that particular question. We'll be right back. We're back to continue the conversation with Ben Cloud, CEO of Biodel AG, a Maricopa County, Arizona company that recently introduced Sequester. It's a soil treatment that increases the carbon capture capabilities of the land and also has a variety of other benefits for the crops and the soil. Ben, following on the conversation we were having before the break, are there other forms of managed land? We were talking about intensively farmed land, that being about 2 billion acres. But are there other forms of managed land that we could treat with Sequester to expand these carbon benefits?
Well, yes, there certainly is. And it would be forest land and range land. Obviously, there's many acres of that. But its ability to sequester carbon is at a lower rate per acre than the intensive farmland. As to whether it's practical for those users to utilize Sequester is something they have to consider for each operation. But it can certainly help to promote the restoration of soil function where it's been lost. And probably the best method on those lands is grazing. Grazing just really can rapidly restore poor conditions if that grazing is managed properly. So I would refer you to like the savory method and approaches like that are highly effective in sequestering a lot of carbon and improving the conditions and production capability of those lands.
Well, and we've had the Savory Institute on the show before, so it's great to hear that that's something that's already in discussion. Now, Sequester is a regenerative agriculture tool. Are you working to get that kind of a certification so that farmers will also be able to carry the benefit and communicate the benefit to their customers in the future?
Well, there's not really a certification requirement, but certainly that's where we are promoting this product into the marketplace. It is a regenerative tool. When a farm operator, for example, is considering what they can do to restore soil function and the like, I would break it down into really 4 categories that they have to consider. They can either inoculate, and each one of them requires inoculation with beneficial microbes and then feeding those microbes to get them to a functional level. So first and foremost would be grazing. That is a very effective way to, at least inoculate the soil and feed those microbes initially. But when we're talking large acreages, that is not something that every crop producer doesn't want to be in the cattle business, for example,
sure.
or other animals grazing. And so, that's one option. The second option is to apply compost or manures to the field, which again is, what are they doing? They're applying beneficial microbes plus the food source, and literally applying tons of this material on a per acre basis. The third option is microbial extracts, again, the microbes, plus a food source, which would be a biofertilizer.
Okay.
And so now you're applying 2 different products, not near the volume that you have to do with the other 2 methods, but at least it inoculates the soil and gets things functioning. And again, we're into the realm there where it is more applicable for large growers. And so the fourth one is where Sequester comes in, because Sequester is made, or the cyanobacteria is a photosynthetic autotroph, which is nitrogen fixing. It is self-contained as far as the microbial benefit and the nutrients. or the food source. And so it's just more convenient to apply a few gallons of that per acre than it is the other method. So we're offering convenience.
And do you see large scale ag companies thinking about how to switch from the petrochemical based fertilizers and treatments they've been using to this? Are they thinking regeneration at this point and coming to you to talk about it?
They are definitely thinking it and exploring all of the options. And here's the challenge. If you think about it today, we've got in the U.S., for example, we have 400 million intensively farmed acres that produce the vast majority of the food we consume. Right now, about 20 million acres, or about 5% of that total, would be categorized under the regenerative approach, which is primarily crops grown to organic standards. Even though regenerative is not an organic standard, but it's it uses the same principle of soil health as the foundation of crop production. And so the remaining 95% of the acreage that is currently under conventional operating methods, that's what's got to transition here over the next 30 years or so.
Okay.
And so when we're looking at product concepts like Sequester, we're looking to provide a tool that large-scale growers can easily adopt into their current farming program, utilizing the same equipment they have on hand without major modification or what they would consider to be risk factors to their current enterprise. And so that's where the future benefit of regenerative is going to come from. It's those larger commercial growers that need to transition.
Now, you mentioned the idea of removing the legacy anthropogenic CO2, and that, I think, creates an entirely new line of revenue for farmers over the course of the next 50 to 100 years until we get back to the 350 parts per million we started with, or a little lower. And your site discusses the potential for farmers to monetize the carbon that they sequester, creating that second line of business for them. Is there a convenient way for a farmer to establish the amount of carbon sequestered? How do you support them in beginning to pursue those carbon credit opportunities?
Well, it is coming, Mitch. Unfortunately, today there's a number of companies that have what I would consider have jumped the gun on trying to offer carbon credits that can generate additional income for the farmer. Yeah. And it's really not just the farmer, it's the landowner. So whoever that is. There are issues that are yet to be settled. And so our opinion is that it's still a little bit early to sign on to a specific program at this point. Okay. We expect that by early 2023, our advisors are telling us that the USDA will have finalized the protocols for the various incentive programs that they're going to support. And that is when we need to look to actually, sign on to various programs that might be available. It's a somewhat complicated process, as you may know, because there's issues relative to what are called additionality, right, and permanence. And those have to be resolved, and the protocols of how they're going to be measured. And until that's done, really none of these registries are able to issue what we call a quality carbon credit that is readily marketable in the marketplace.
There's clearly a lot of excitement, and I agree with you. A lot of folks are rushing into this, they're looking at the money before the real problem. So you're saying you do believe that there will be standards that we'll be able to really build on within the next 6 months. Is that the only major blocker at this point? Or what are there other issues that you mentioned that we should be thinking about addressing?
Yeah, it's reaching this point of quality. Right now, there's an abundance of carbon credits available to buy, but they're not of a quality that the buyers are willing to pay for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are either going to have to be heavily discounted or taken out of the market at some point. As the quality carbon credits come in, we'll see more of a stable market emerge. But economists are predicting that we're likely to see the value of these carbon credits rise rather dramatically over the next 10, 20 years. And I would suggest that that's highly likely,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because we our inability to meet our CO2 mitigation goals as a society. We're in a serious situation here, and the free market could help drive this to a great extent.
No doubt we're in a serious situation. Always questionable whether the market will be as reasonable as we would like it to be. So the question that occurs to me as I listen to you is does Biodel itself get involved in facilitating carbon credits for its customers and even facilitating transactions, which suggests you could do interesting things with your pricing, like just get paid out of the carbon credits rather than forcing somebody up front to pay? There's a lot of interesting options. Have you thought about how to facilitate that line of revenue for your customer? And
yeah, certainly we have. That's something that's it's an ongoing discussion. But how we work with our customers at this point is simply to suggest that we are prepared today to be able to analyze and pull the soil analysis necessary to create a baseline of carbon, so that measurement begins now. But as far as the actual issuance and sale of the carbon credits, that's going to be down the road a little bit. So the real key is that you have to have a registry firm that is going to, issue their protocols that are acceptable. You have to have a third-party validator. So our agenda is simply to help to manage those relationships on behalf of the grower, and give the grower every option to capture the greatest possible value. And so those who are signing on right now a little too early are kind of locking themselves into something that might come back to bite them later on.
What's the time frame for your thinking about when that really reliable regime of standards, validation, and transactions is going to be in place? What do you assume in your business?
Our expectation is 2024 is when you'll really see the emergence of the quality standards in what is offered to the actual landowners. And so at that point they can sign on, or again back to the measurement concept. As long as we are using or are in compliance with the protocols of measurement, we can then refer back to that, and we might be 5 years down the road before we actually sign on to a registry and try to capture value for those credits. But it is coming. Again,
very encouraging to hear that. And so many of our guests talk about the fact that we are really literally on the cusp of this transition to an environment where we'll both be drawing down CO2 and there will be a financial incentive for doing so. So the question that follows is, should a homeowner also be thinking about, particularly if they have a large lawn, an acre, monetizing CO2 as well? I mean, that could be good for $350, $500 a year in carbon credits at 3,000 pounds per acre.
Yes, but the cost of analyzing that and getting it into a marketable form is at least today rather excessive.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's going to be an option for individual homeowners or even small farm owners that are like, have an orchard out back that's an acre or two.
Okay.
Just to be blunt about it, the economic incentives are not there. However, I would suggest that residential homeowners and small farm owners tend to be more driven by the opportunity to do their part,
right,
sequestering carbon, than farmers are, who are really driven by the economics of water savings and fertilizer savings and the like. So that doesn't mean that there won't be opportunities arise, but we're not seeing it today, and I'm not sure we will.
Well, and to your point, I think it's incumbent on all of us to do our part. And if we can do it for $12.81 for 2,500 square feet, not a bad investment if it produces a good return.
Exactly.
Ben, how can folks learn more about Sequester, buy it? Is it all online at this point, or can you get it in any of the major home stores?
Yeah, no, it's all online at this point. Customers or those interested can go to our website at it's www.sequester.ag. And for those who are interested to even invest in this sector, we have a current WeFunder crowdfunding offering going on.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so it's we're trying to bring in a few extra dollars to really build our market promotion into the marketplace going forward. And so that's available at wefunder.com, and then you would just enter in Biodel AG, and you can see what that's all about too. So I hope people will take a look at it.
Well, thank you very much, Ben, for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Ben Cloud. He's the CEO of Biodel AG. They're based in Maricopa, Arizona. And they recently introduced Sequester, a cyanobacteria-based soil supplement that can help capture and store CO2 while reducing water requirements and improving plant growth. You know, the potential to capture 3,000 pounds of CO2 per acre of farmland each year, especially while supporting regenerative agricultural practices, is very encouraging. And if homeowners add their efforts using carbon capture enhancing treatments like Sequester on some of the 40 million square acres of lawns in the United States, that can help reduce, first, human CO2 impacts on an annual basis, and ultimately potentially lead to the drawdown of CO2 and an end to the climate crisis. This is just one tool in the quiver, but we don't have to wait for carbon credit markets to create incentives if we've really committed ourselves to reducing emissions. So perhaps Sequester is one of the answers you can try at home. And if you're involved in agriculture, consider it for your fields. Will you take a few minutes to share this show with your friends, family, neighbors, and coworkers? We would sure appreciate it. You can be the amplifier that spreads more ideas so that we create less waste and start to restore the environment. Please let folks know you can find sustainability in your ear on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, and all the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness. I will really appreciate your support. Thank you. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We're going to be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.